Greetings and welcome to America in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, executive editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me today is the Center Square's Washington, D.C. bureau chief, Casey Harper. How are you, Casey?
Doing good, Dan. How are you?
I am doing fine, thank you. We are recording this on Friday, October 13th. Casey, as the world holds its collective breath as Israel prepares a ground invasion in Gaza, a very tumultuous region of the country, there's concerns back home, too, about what could happen here. Since President Joe Biden has taken office, there have been more than 8 million border encounters since he changed U.S. immigration policy. That number includes well over 1 million what are called gotaways, folks who evade capture or apprehension at the border, get into the country unbeknownst to federal agents. And the Border Patrol recently released the number of suspected and known terrorists who have been apprehended. These are not the gotaways. These have been apprehended, and it's at least 659 just in fiscal 2023 alone. But that does not include gotaways, the folks we don't know. We don't know how many of those are known or suspected terrorists. Law enforcement across the country, including sheriff's groups, are raising an alarm about what that could mean, and essentially are saying, we need to do something and close these borders. We don't know who's in the country because of all of these gotaways. And again, as war erupts in the Middle East, the leader of Hamas terrorist organization yesterday called for jihad in the United States, against Americans and against Jewish folks. Because we don't know who's in the country, who's illegally entered the country, is there a cause for concern here?
It's hard to say. I think the federal intelligence apparatus in the U.S. has tried to downplay this, to say this is more, conjecture than real hard data or evidence. But, that doesn't do much to assuage people's fear when we see what's happening in the Middle East, when Israeli intelligence reportedly had no idea that this attack from Hamas was coming. And of course, our own intelligence in the U.S. has been caught on the back heels before. And so, you got to take all that with a grain of salt. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have an extra eye out right now when you have such a brazen attack from these Hamas terrorists in Israel, which is, I think it's easy for people to write off the Middle East a little bit, but Israel is a very developed country. It's very wealthy. There's a lot of very strong military defense, security there. And yeah, they were able to get by. Of course, the border between Gaza and Israel is very strongly guarded. So this was a pretty sophisticated operation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the idea that something like that could happen here, of course, it's something to consider, especially when, as you referenced, and we can get into more, the federal data shows that there are hundreds of terrorists hundreds of people on the terrorist watch list coming into the U.S. every year. Then those are just the ones we know about. You referenced that gotaways number. So there's millions of gotaways, people who, maybe an agent just kind of sees them and isn't able to catch them. And who knows how many suspected or actual terrorists are in that group. And of course, we know from 9/11, it only takes a handful. You don't need an army to do a lot of devastation and wreak a lot of havoc in the U.S. It can be just a handful of well-planned terrorists can do a lot of damage in the U.S.
Yeah, members of the American Sheriff Alliance met recently, essentially issued a warning calling for immediate action because of what they're saying are these heightened terrorist threats against the U.S. homeland. They put out a statement. Alliance members discussed, quote, the continued pressure and strain on resources due to the lack of border enforcement throughout the United States, including the alarming statistics of encounters with individuals found to be on the terrorist watch list, also known as the terrorist screening data set. The Alliance notes that the apprehensions of known and suspected terrorists. And remember, this is not just, folks from Mexico and Central America and South America trying to enter the U.S. illegally since Biden's taken office. There are people from 150 nations across the world who have been apprehended, including some of these Middle East countries, including from China, including from Russia. And then we both referenced the gotaway numbers, the folks who enter between ports of entry. Border Patrol has drones and other video surveillance. We might not have, agents right there on hand to capture these folks, but we have video of them entering the country illegally, getting past any kind of security, and it's a free-for-all for that. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they're from. We do know, as we just cited, nearly 600 known or suspected terrorists apprehended, but we don't know how many of those are or how many others are known or suspected terrorists could be among that got-away group. And with the situation in the Middle East now, I don't know. I think we need to do something about our border policies.
Yeah, I think, there's a growing bipartisan consensus that would agree with you on that, Dan. And that's why so many governors reached out to Biden, Democratic governors, and said, hey, you need to do something. He did restart building some of the border wall, but this is a longstanding problem. There's already, probably hundreds of these kinds of terrorists in the U.S., and we can't really go back and take them out. Of course, we hardly deport anyone now. And, setting the terrorist issue aside, there is also just straight up regular rank and file criminal, the criminal question. And, I found this stat to be really interesting. In fiscal year 2022, ICE agents found about 46,000 non-citizens with criminal histories, including about 200,000 with assault charges, over 8,000 with sexual assault offenses, over 5,500 with weapons offenses, over 1,500 homicide related, and well over 1,000 kidnapping. So, like you said, there's a lot of systemic issues at the border. I am a little heartened to see that there's some bipartisan agreement that there needs to be some bigger changes done there, but we'll see.
Well, thank you as always for your insight into these very important stories, Casey, but we are out of time. Listeners can keep up with all of our news at thecentersquare.com. For Casey Harper, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe. Thank you for listening.